Good morning, NorthPoint Church, and happy almost Labor Day to you. I hope that you're able to celebrate Labor Day by not laboring, maybe tomorrow, getting a little bit of a break from it. I also want to tell you this morning that I love you. I love our church. I love you. I'm thankful for each and every one of you. I know that some of you are brand new to NorthPoint. You're just like checking things out. Others of you have been around for a long time. Some of you are old, and some of you are young, like me, and vibrant. No, I'm kidding. Some of you are like really devoted followers of Jesus, like you're really in this and you want to follow him and walk with him. And others of you are like, I don't know yet. I'm still checking this out. I'm still figuring it out if I want to be in this or not. And I just say to every single one of you the same thing I said. I love you. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for the people that God has brought here and what God is allowing us to do. I'm even thankful for the guy that came up to me last week at Party on the Lawn. So finally, first of all, parenthesis, Party on the Lawn for the first time ever in the history of NorthPoint Church. We had the whole thing. We did the whole thing without crazy weather, and a number of you were here. If not, we missed you, but had a great time. And so this guy from our church comes up to me at Party on the Lawn, and he says, hey, you got to stop talking about me on Sundays. I know you were talking about me this morning. And I looked at him, I was like, what do you mean? He goes, the pain in the butt comment? I know that you meant me. And so we had a good laugh together. I assured him, I promise you I wasn't thinking about anybody in particular at that time, but if you want to see a list, no, I'm just kidding. I said, I wasn't thinking about anybody in particular, and we laughed a little bit, and eventually the guy walked away, and I was like, what a jerk, that guy. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all, but it's that kind of environment as well that we want to have at this church, a place where we enjoy each other, we have some fun, we laugh together. You know, life is hard enough. Like, you need to enjoy the good moments and the fun moments and be able to laugh at yourself a little bit too. And so we want to have that kind of culture where we weep with those who weep. Like, when you're going through something, I think you want to be here. You want to be in this place with other people who can help you walk through those things. And then when you're celebrating something, we want to celebrate with you and the good things that are happening in your life. And so we want to talk about this a little bit more, who God has called us to be as a church. And we've been in this short 3-week series talking about our mission and values as a church, who God has called us to be. And you've seen that our mission is to cultivate communities of grace and truth. We want to cultivate this community and communities that are filled with the grace and the truth of Jesus Christ. Jesus is grace and truth, and that's who we want to be as we walk with him. And we're going to do this in 3 ways. We do it by looking to Jesus, first of all, that Jesus is our number one value. It is all about him. He created the world. He gave us his word. He's the one that brings us into a relationship with God. So everything we need is found in Jesus. And yet, when you come to trust in Jesus, we've seen that he lets us do this in a family with each other by embracing community, embracing other followers of Jesus. But then we see it's not just about this family that we're in, but Jesus wants to expand his family. He wants to grow his family, and this is our core value of engaging culture. And that's the one that we want to talk about today, engaging culture. When we talk about engaging culture, what we're really saying is that Jesus has a mission on this earth, and we get to be a part of that mission. We get to be a part of what Jesus is doing in this world. We could even say it this way: Jesus actually accomplishes his mission in this world through us. Have you ever thought about this before? That when you come to trust in Jesus Christ, you come to see that you need a relationship with God, and that comes not by your work and earning, but by placing trust in Jesus and giving your life to him. Why doesn't Jesus whisk you off to heaven and just be done with it then? Why doesn't he just take you out of this world? There's a lot of reasons for that, but one reason is this world, this earth is very valuable, that the people in this world are valuable. But it also has to mean that God has something for us to do on this earth. And he doesn't just take us to heaven because he wants to expand his family, and he uses us to be a part of doing that, to be on mission with him in this world. And I want you to see this today from John chapter 1. So one more time, we're really getting to know John chapter 1 these last few weeks. Turn there one more time today. And if you don't have a Bible, there's Bibles in front of you. It's on page 860, or you could do it on your device as well. In John chapter 1, this is, first of all, what we saw in week 1. We saw that Jesus Christ, who John calls the Word, is the one who communicates God to us. He shows us what God is like. And we saw that this Jesus is actually the second person of a Trinity, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit that are God. Jesus is with God, and he also is fully God. This Jesus is the one who created everything that exists, and in him we find life and light. He intends to bring life and light to this world. That's our core value of looking to Jesus. That's why we look to him, because the creator of the life is the one who knows all about life. And when we see Jesus, we see the embodiment of grace and truth. That's what God looks like. God looks like grace and truth. As we look to Jesus, secondly, we've come to see that we become a part of a spiritual family. Verse 12 of John 1 says that as many as received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave them the right to become children of God. And so belief in Jesus places you in a family, a spiritual family. So we don't have to do this alone. In fact, we can't do the Christian life alone. Jesus's movement is a family thing, loving each other, doing life together. Like we said earlier, weeping with those who weep and rejoicing with those who rejoice. And sometimes maybe even making fun of each other a little bit. All of those good things in this family, that's embracing community. We also saw something interesting last week. We saw how relationship is actually foundational to God himself. So that the sense you have in you that you need friendships, that you want relationships with other people, is not just a nice feeling that everybody happens to have. It's a feeling that everybody has because God created you in his image, and the God who created you in his image is a relational being at his core. So relationship is foundational to who God is, and so then when he creates human beings, he creates you for relationship with him and relationship with other people. But then we could also in John 1 see our third core value in the text. And it goes like this. In a similar way that we are relational because God is relational, we come to find out that when we trust in Jesus, we become recruiters because God is a recruiter. I want you to notice this truth all throughout the text of John 1. And we're just gonna walk through it. John 1 and verse 5, we read this. The light, Jesus is the light. This light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. What John implies here, he doesn't directly say it, but he implies that we are all living in darkness, that humanity has essentially said to God, no, I can do life on my own, or no, I'll figure this out on my own, or no, I don't need you. And so we're darkened in our understanding, and we're separated from a relationship with the God who created us. Into this situation, Jesus shines his light. He comes to us. He approaches us. And how does Jesus approach us? Look at verse 9. The true light that gives light to everyone actually came into the world. He was coming into the world. Jesus comes into the world of darkness. He enters the struggle of humanity physically and personally. That's verse 14. The Word, the eternal Word, became flesh, became human, and made his dwelling among us. And we were able to see his glory, his light, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father and was full of grace and truth. Jesus, the eternal God, the light of the world, becomes human. Philippians chapter 2, another book in the New Testament, it says that Jesus humbled himself and took the form of a servant. That Jesus lowered himself to become human so that we could see the light of God and come into a relationship with God our Father and have life, which is actually pretty incredible and can blow your mind if you really think about it. Because I know that you're great and all. I know that you kill it at work and you're a great husband or a great wife or a great kid and you're really good at sports and you're maybe really intelligent and smart. But when you're God, it is a downgrade to become you. And it is a downgrade to become me, right? When you've created everything to become your creation or one with your creation, that is a demotion if you are God. This is a terrible illustration, but I'm gonna use it anyways. It might be like you becoming an ant. Not like an A-U-N-T, that might be cool, but like an A-N-T ant, like a little tiny insect. And I don't know if you've seen Honey, I Shrunk the Kids before. This movie that was made in, the 1950s or something. Maybe not that. It's forever ago. The animation would be terrible on it, if you watch it now. But you should watch it at some time as your family. And there's a scene in there where this kind of scientist dad shrinks all of his children, and they're in the backyard or something, and the grass is they're like this, and the grass is this tall, and then there's a scorpion that tries to come and kill them, and it's 20 times their size. And then an ant, a special auntie comes along and grabs the scorpion and tries to kill it. And you get this picture of these little tiny people and insects are bigger than them. Now, that's not exactly the same thing as God becoming human, but it might get a little close to what that might be like, to lower yourself in that way. Why did Jesus do this? He did it so you could know him. He did it so you could find life in him. Since we could not get to God, since we can't figure it out on our own or earn our way towards heaven, towards God, Jesus comes down to us. And this is what we call the incarnation. It is the incarnation of Jesus Christ. God, who is spirit, becomes human. Get this, in order to meet us where we are. So something to clarify in a theological and a doctrinal sense is this. God the Son, the second person of the Trinity, has always and eternally existed. That's John 1:1. In the beginning was this Word. This Word is with God. This Word was God. And he created all things in conjunction with God the Father and the Holy Spirit. But he actually became Jesus, human, at a specific point in history. The Son has not always been human. The Son became human in a human timeline within history. When Mary and Joseph named him Jesus, that's when he got that name, Jesus. He wasn't considered or known to be Jesus before that time. The eternal Son of God became human at a point in history, which is incredible. The prophet Isaiah foretold that this would take place about 700 years before it ever happened. And then Matthew, one of the gospel writers, records it in his gospel in Matthew chapter 1. After Jesus is born as a human being, Matthew says this: all of this took place to fulfill what the Lord said through the prophet Isaiah. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel. And what does Emmanuel mean? Emmanuel means God is with us. God himself, the creator of the universe, has come down to us. And so this is what the incarnation is. The incarnation is God with us. God takes our form to meet us where we are at and draw us into his life. Did you know that God is a missionary? He's the first and the greatest missionary. God is a recruiter. And when you receive his life and you come into his spiritual family, guess what? You become part of the recruitment team. We're part of the welcoming team. We're part of the bringing other people into God in the same way that God is recruiting us, we seek to recruit others. And not because you better, and not because you have to, and not because you're being yelled at to do it, but because you step back and you say, wait a minute, if the great, huge God of all of the universe would come down for us and lower himself, not just for us, but for me, that he would bring me into his grace and truth, that he would treat me with such kindness and with such love and call me into his life, I want other people to get in on this. Like, I want my family members and my friends and my coworkers and my classmates to know this, even if they don't always want it, even if they push back against it, even if they don't exactly see it. I am motivated by the grace of Jesus to me. I want them to get in, even if it's a little intimidating and you don't always know how to do it. You want that, right? The incarnation of Jesus for us propels us to be incarnational to others, to love others, to meet them where they're at, just like Jesus met us where we're at, and to point them to him. I mean, think about it this way. It's the way that most of you that are here today came to believe in Jesus, to become a follower of Jesus, right? Think about how did you become a follower of Jesus? I imagine that someone invited you to church, or someone gave you a Bible, or someone taught you about Jesus, or someone said, hey, here's the story of what Jesus did in my life. Could I share that with you? Right? There was someone that you could trace your story back to and realize they helped bring you to Jesus, because that's how it works. And that's what Jesus intends to do through us. Recruiting, incarnating, just like he did for you. Now, notice briefly a couple of pieces on how this is communicated then throughout the rest of the New Testament scriptures. For instance, after Jesus' death and his resurrection, he meets with his disciples before he's gonna ascend back up into heaven, and he says this to them in John chapter 20 and verse 21. Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, now I'm sending you." So he takes his closest followers and he says, look, God the Father called me to incarnate myself, to come to you, to meet you where you're at, to draw you into my family. And now I'm actually gonna go back up into heaven, and guess what? You're on the recruiting team. I am now sending you out to do the same thing that I've done for you. We see this expanded in a fuller way in what we call the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28. Same thing, Jesus is about to ascend back up into heaven, and he says to his followers, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. Now, to be clear, both of these statements Jesus made to his first followers, what we call the disciples who would become the apostles, the early leaders of the Christian church, right? Jesus' movement. And yet we get an indication that this thing in Matthew 28 is meant for us today. And do you see the clue that tells us this is also a charge to us today? What does Jesus say at the very end in verse 20? He says, "And I'm with you always to the very end of the age." Now, are Jesus' disciples still alive and living today 2,000 years later? No, they're not. And Jesus didn't intend that they would live for 2,000 years. You know who's living today and as followers of Jesus? Us, you and me. Praise God we get to be in the family of God. And Jesus assures us that his presence is with us down to this day as we make disciples of all the nations, right? As we baptize and teach and draw people into a relationship with Jesus. We continue on this mission. Meeting people where they're at, making disciples, baptizing them, teaching them, and expecting this spiritual family to grow. Now, some of you might be like, okay, that's a great explanation. That sounds really good and all, but it's hard. And there are barriers to doing this, right? Aren't there barriers? I mean, aren't there some things that keep us from recruiting people into this family, from engaging our culture by helping bring them to Jesus? So let's just talk about those barriers for a minute that many of us face. And I'm just gonna put them all up here. We'll just talk about them briefly. One barrier that we might face to being part of Jesus's recruitment team is just simply motivation. You just don't wanna do it, right? We're not motivated to do it. Either we just don't think about it or we just don't feel like we wanna do it. And one of the reasons we may not be motivated is because we are so busy, right? There's just a lot of things to do. And I don't mean there's a lot of even bad things to do. Some of you are probably doing terrible things, but it's mostly good things, right? There's a lot of good things. I gotta do work. I gotta do school. I gotta take care of my family. There's a lot of relationships that I've gotta manage and I've gotta figure those things out. I gotta do this. We got the sports things. We wanna give our kids that opportunity in music or in sports and those things. And college football started last weekend. So that's pretty important. And Iowa State and Iowa both off to a good start, right? Yay, we can cheer. We don't have to be for one or the other. Okay, yay. No, you maybe do, okay. And I need to watch some football, right? Okay. So it could just be busy. There's just a lot of things to do, and there are a lot of things to do. A barrier to being on this recruitment team could also be knowledge. Maybe you didn't know that Jesus wants you to be a part of it. I mean, honestly, most of you probably do, but some of you might be like, I didn't really know that I had a responsibility in that way and that Jesus wants to use me to be a part of that I could do it. And for those of you, it's I just don't know how to do it. How am I supposed to do that? I've never done it before. It's not really been modeled to me. What would that look like to try to invite people into a relationship with Jesus? How do you do that? Now, those are pretty common things that probably anybody would come up, but let me mention two other barriers I think that we face that maybe aren't quite as intuitive. And one is this concept that we have that being a missionary, that sharing Jesus with other people is for special ops Christians. You know what I mean? It's there's the branches of the armed services and then there's Navy SEALs. And Navy SEALs, they do the really hard, tough work that other people, and certainly common people like us, we don't do. That's for special ops. And so we sort of think that this thing we're talking about today is for special ops Christians. It's for pastors. It's for missionaries that go overseas to other places, but common folk like us. We're just not trained. I don't know if I could really be able to do that. And then one other barrier I think that we might face, which may be surprising to you, that keeps us from engaging our culture with the message of Jesus is Christian community. It's actually Christian community. I think if you think about this, that all organizations, churches, even small groups, have this tendency to become inward and about themselves. So community and even some level of comfort is important for a local church like ours, right? And for followers of Jesus. That was what we talked about all last week. It's one of our core values, so we think it's very important. But you also know that there is always this tension between good community and becoming self-focused. Because when we become self-focused, then we become exclusive and we become cliquish and we tend to only think about our in-group. In fact, it can get to the place where we are tribal, where we are angry and suspicious against anybody that is outside of this small group that we have put together. Now hear me carefully. We need community. But have we become exclusive? Have we sometimes in the church or in our groups become overly self-protective and self-focused? Have we isolated ourselves into a bubble where it's only very safe people that we're around? And we failed to realize that Jesus said, I'm not taking you out of the world. I'm sending you into the world. And I don't want you to be of the world. Don't look just like the world. You're gonna have to push back on some things there, but I want you to be inside of this world, working jobs in this world, around people who don't know me. And sometimes you're gonna be around people that are very hostile to Christianity. That's where I've placed you. Go, I'm gonna empower you, I'm gonna strengthen you, get out there. Don't just be in a holy bubble and isolate yourself and your family from everybody else that isn't a follower of Jesus. Look, Jesus' family is intended to be close and deep, but it's also welcoming. It's also recruiting. It's also inviting. And you can be a part of this. You can be a part of this. We can overcome all of these barriers and engage our culture on mission with Jesus. How do we do that? How do we do what we're talking about today? We do it like we seek to do everything else, with grace and truth. Grace and truth is the way, it is the method that we want to use to engage our culture. So let's talk about how grace and truth applies to engaging culture. And it's gonna help us to overcome those barriers, and I think to be able to get after it. Let's talk first about truth. How does truth apply to engaging our culture? Well, the truth that every single person that has ever been created needs to embrace is the gospel of Jesus Christ. What we call the good news about Jesus Christ. John chapter 1 lays it out for us that Jesus, who created all things, is the light that is coming into the world to bring us the grace and truth of God the Father. And because we couldn't get to him, he comes down to us. If we would look at the rest of John, we would see that this Jesus goes on to live a perfect life, a perfect human life, following perfectly the will of God the Father who created him. He is the perfect human being to ever exist, the only one ever. And in that way, he is able to sacrifice himself for us on the cross, where he exchanges places with us. Because of our sin, our rebellion, our saying no to God, we are separated from him. In order to come into a relationship with him, the penalty for that has to be paid. Jesus pays that penalty by sacrificing himself on the cross for us and gives us his righteousness. It's an exchange so that you can come to God and relate to him. Jesus lives a perfect life, dies and resurrects. That is the gospel. And through receiving him, through faith in him, you become a child of God into this spiritual family. It's not by our works. It's not by you going to church. It's not by you doing religious things. It's not even by you praying and reading your Bible that God looks down at you and says, all right, I'm gonna accept you and you can go to heaven and have a relationship with me. It's all through faith and belief in what Jesus Christ has done. That's what saves us and brings us into the family of God. You know, one way to think about the way that the world works and the way that people, that we are, is that everyone in this world is trying to save themselves through something. There's some means that every person is trying to use to find happiness, fulfillment, and salvation in their life. And you could just think about yourself, and you could think about the people that you do life with, and you could begin to come up with a list of things that people are using to do this. People try their jobs and their careers. People try relationships. They try sex. They try money. They try possessions. They try travel and vacations to fulfill them and to save them and to make them feel like, hey, this is really the thing that's doing it for me. I mean, people even try crazy things like Apple products, right? And they make their life all about, like, which I happen to actually have the watch, so maybe I'm talking about myself, I don't know. Like I got an Apple Watch, I got an iPhone, I got an iPad, I got a MacBook, I got the stickers, I know all of the latest news, I know when the releases are coming, I'm watching the live videos of the next products, and I've surrounded myself with Apple, or whatever other thing you want to put in the blank to try to fulfill me and satisfy me and save me. Or you're trying to earn or perform for somebody else. And here's the thing we also know. It will always fail. Every single one of those things will fail you. And it will fail your friends, and it will fail the people that you are doing life with. Because since Jesus is the one who created life, he's the only one that can give us life. The creator of life is the only one who can actually provide what you need. And that creator came down, incarnated himself for us, and sacrificed himself for us so that we could have his life in a relationship with him. And look, this is the truth that we need to communicate to people. This is the truth of the gospel. This is our message. But hear me carefully this morning. We must also personally believe this gospel. and follow Jesus ourselves. When we grow in understanding this truth throughout our entire lives, it will begin to come out in the way that we talk and the way that we live. So that this truth about the gospel, that we relate to God on the basis of grace and what Jesus has done, becomes the operating principle of our lives. So that truth is not just something we tell people, it's not just something we defend for others, but it is what we live out. Because remember from John 1, truth is relational. Truth is actually a person. And there are propositional facts and there is information that is very clear that must be communicated, yes, but at the end of the day, truth is Jesus. Truth is a relationship with him. So think about it this way. This might be a little bit like many people's relationship with math. Okay, think about your relationship with math. You might be like, I don't have a relationship with math. I have a calculator. That's my relationship with math. That's how it goes, right? Now, for many people, what you did with math is that when you went through school, you did just the necessary stuff you had to do. And for some of you, it was a necessary evil, right? I just got through math. I don't want to think about it anymore. I did the work that I had to do. I got a passing grade. I moved on. Until you have a teenager that brings home geometry homework and is like, hey, could you help me with this? I don't quite understand it. And you're like, yes, honey, of course, your parent is an adult and I know stuff. Give me a few minutes. And you go Google to try to figure out what the homework is so that you can help your kid out with it, right? And you start remembering back in your head when you were growing up and you said, when am I ever gonna use this in my life? There's calculators that are available. When am I ever gonna use it? You know when you're gonna use it? You're gonna use it when you have a teenager that comes to you and says, help me with my geometry homework. That's when you're gonna need to use it, right? Now, for many people, you have a relationship like that with math. Even if you're good at it, you don't really remember advanced mathematics and how to do all of those things. And then think about the difference between you and the professor of mathematics. The person who has devoted their life to knowing, studying, eating, living, breathing, drinking mathematics all the time, so that when they teach their classes, they don't even need notes. They just say, oh, this is what we're talking about today, and they go up to the whiteboard and they just do their work. And any question you ask them, they know it intuitively. It is native to them, and they love everything mathematics. Before we lived here, we lived in Ohio, my wife and I and our family, and I was a pastor on the campus of Miami University, Miami of Ohio, a church like on the corner of that campus. And so we had a lot of academics in the church, a lot of professors. And I remember when we were first there and we were meeting people, there was a professor of mathematics. And this was a younger guy, but he had gone to like MIT or something like that. And this guy was just a brain. Humble, very humble guy, but just knew his stuff. And I remember talking to him, getting to know him. And I said, Dennis, I go, what does one do to get a PhD in mathematics? Like, what is that dissertation about? What do you have to do to be able to earn your PhD? And he humbly said, oh, it's not really that hard. You just have to come up with new math problems and solutions. And I was like, yeah, sounds like a piece of cake, man. Like I, could just do that. He's like, he's just sort of flippant about it. He's like, it really isn't that difficult. And I just think, when I think about Dennis just embodied a life, he loved it. His brain worked that way. He operated that way. And it just came out so that it was easy for him because it was native to him. And look, this is what Jesus wants for us in relationship with him, that we live in him. We love him so that his truth is embodied in us. We get to know him more. We learn, we grow, and it just comes out in our life. So it's not forced, and it's not a have to. It's a we get to, we want to, it is who we are. And so for sure, it takes time to learn and to grow in his truth. You don't know everything on day one of following Jesus. But as you do, it becomes native to you. And then as you engage with others, it becomes more natural. You're not forcing it. It just is who you are. Because it's not just knowing stuff and knowing facts, it's knowing Jesus and his truth. One of the ways that we see this in Scripture is, if we were to look at many different stories in Scriptures, we would see how when people have an experience with Jesus and they come to trust him, they often just share with other people about what Jesus did in their life. If you grew up in the church, you might hear it as sharing your testimony, right? You're just sharing your story about what Jesus did for you and inviting other people to come and to see Jesus. I think about the woman that Jesus talked to in the Gospel of John, in John chapter 4, the woman at the well that had been an outcast from her society. Jesus has a short conversation with her. She comes to believe in Jesus, accepts his life, and she goes back into her town excited, and she just says to the townspeople, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he be the Messiah?" That was her testimony. She just said, "Come see Jesus. He changed my life." And you know what John goes on to tell us? Many people from that town come to believe in Jesus, first on the basis of her testimony, and then when they come and see Jesus, they say, "Hey, he is the real deal. We believe in him too." Jesus used her to just invite people into a relationship with him. And in that way, it's not real intimidating. You don't have to know everything. You can share your story and invite people to Jesus, the Jesus who died and resurrected and brings you life. Now, what you'll find and what you know, maybe some of you are already thinking about this right now, is that some people want more details, right? Some people have questions. Some people have hang-ups. Some people have problems with Christianity. And some people have had really bad experiences with with religion. And so another part of engaging culture with truth is us seeking to understand the struggles and the hang-ups and the questions that people are dealing with. Like, thinking about, hey, what are your friends dealing with in their life that might keep them from believing in Jesus? What kind of hang-ups does your family member have that keeps them from being like, no, I don't want any part of that? What are they wrestling with? It might be that they were burned by the church. It might be the idea that Christians seem, to them at least, way more interested in political power and individual rights than they are in loving others. It might be a personal suffering that they have faced in their life and they don't know what to do with a God who allows hard things. Or that they think that science disproves the Bible. Or they think that the Bible is overly restrictive when it comes to sexual ethics. Or maybe they just have a wrong impression of Christianity. So as a church, we want to continue to work on showing how Jesus addresses these things. This is why we regularly speak about the doubts and the questions and these kinds of issues that people have with Christianity. That's why, as hard as it is, sometimes we get into these things. And so at NorthPoint, we're going to talk about justice issues. And we're going to talk about sexuality. And we're going to talk about gender issues. And we're going to talk about the doubts that people have. And we do that with a posture of humility, allowing God's truth to shape everything that we believe in, but also with an understanding of the culture in which we are living and seeking to address those things in a good and a right way. I think of the Apostle Paul, who was this missionary of the early church who planted so many churches. The book of Acts details in Acts chapter 17 an approach that he had when he went to the town in Athens, Greece. He goes to this town in Greek culture in Athens, and we don't have time to look at all of it, but in Acts chapter 17, it details for us how Paul observes their culture. He makes connections to their culture. He affirms some things from their culture. He calls out some other things from their culture. He quotes their poets. He knows and he quotes the artists of their day that people look to for truth, and he addresses the kinds of questions that they have about life on their terms. He incarnates himself. He becomes a missionary to their culture, understanding them and addressing their issues, even in their style of speaking, so that he can meet them where they're at and invite them into a relationship with Jesus. And look, at NorthPoint, we want to be a place where people can bring their doubts, where we don't act like we have every single thing figured out and every other church is terrible and nobody else knows what they're talking about, and Christianity has always gotten it right in every instance, and every Christian person is amazing. Or not always that, right? We've got to be humble about that. And yet at the same time, we say things like this: we don't have it all figured out, but we know the one who does. And so we keep looking to Jesus and opening his word and his truth, and keep wrestling together with people who are struggling through these things, helping people to see that Jesus is the way. And one of the best ways that we do that is with an approach of grace. That these two things, truth and grace, would go hand in hand. So let's talk about grace for a minute. In John chapter 1, I just remind us one more time. I know I've read this verse a million times, but it shapes everything that we believe. Verse 14 of John 1, one more time, says, "That word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father. And what do we see? He is full of grace and truth." And verse 17, "We had the law, it was given. The truth was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ." Grace. Grace is God giving us what we don't deserve. Grace is God meeting us where we're at and calling us to himself and offering us life. Grace is sacrificial love. is kindness, it is mercy. And so in the same way that we best engage our culture by embodying the truth of Jesus, in the same way we best engage our culture by embodying the grace of Jesus. That is, as followers of Jesus, we see his grace. We seek to live in his grace. We learn more about his grace. We rest in our acceptance into his family. It's where you know that your identity does not come from your work. I mean, you try to do good work, you be faithful with your work, you celebrate the wins, you look to Jesus for help when you struggle in your work and in your school and in your relationships, but who you are is found in the truth that Jesus has adopted you into his family and made you a child of God, and he loves you. I told you this before, God doesn't just even love you, he likes you. He actually likes you, right? He wants you, he wants to grow you, he sees you, he is proud of you as you walk with him and yield to him and rest in him. That's what this grace does in our lives. And when that fills us up and becomes native to us and we embody it, it comes out then in our culture and in the way that we think and in the way that we treat people so that we begin to share that grace and that love with others. One way to say it would be this: we live in and we live out the gospel. If you live in the gospel of Jesus Christ, your worth, your value, your hope, your joy comes in your relationship with him, then you will live out that gospel in what you do. And this is most important. That truth and grace is who we are as people, so that it's genuine. It's not fake and it's not contrived. It becomes our culture. It becomes what we believe. It becomes what we do. It becomes how we approach people, how we treat each other on the inside and on the outside, because that's how Jesus treats us. That's first of all what grace means. We embody the grace of Jesus Christ in our lives, but it also means something else. That genuine grace then will also come to look like specific good deeds. It'll look like us doing good things and specific good things. Notice how Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 16, we read this. Jesus said, "Let your light shine before others." Now, who's the light of the world? Jesus. And when you come to trust in him, he fills you with his light so that you can let that light of Jesus shine towards others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Jesus is the light that fills us with his light so we can shine that light to others. And what does that light look like? It looks like good deeds. It looks like kindness and grace and love in specific actions towards other people. Peter picks up on this in 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 12. And I actually think that Peter was thinking about that time when Jesus said to him and his other followers, "Let your light shine," because his language sounds very similar to Jesus's language here. And here's what Peter says: "Live such good lives among the pagans." And the pagans are what they called non-Christians. Probably not the best term for us to use today, but that's what they called them in the first century, non-Christian. "Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong." Have you ever had people that aren't followers of Jesus accuse you of doing wrong? Be out for you, try to get you, not like you, have something against you? Some of you have family members that are like this. They do not respect your faith at all. And they don't want to have really anything to do with that part of you. And they don't even want to talk about it. Or if they do, they just ridicule you or criticize you. Others of you have work environments or school environments that are like that. It can hard to be a teenager and in school these days, right? And to deal with that. Live such good lives among them that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may, get this, see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that he visits us. That's incredible. That through Jesus Christ and faith in him, if we can see and live in his grace towards us and be filled up with our identity as found in Jesus, he can empower us that even though maybe even we're ridiculed and people don't get it, we can live such good lives that God might turn those ridiculers towards him. They may come to see that no, Jesus is the way. And Paul says a similar thing in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 11. He says, "Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life." It's kind of interesting when you think about this and Paul telling us, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. He doesn't say lead a radical, constant self-sacrifice, crazy, crazy life. He says, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, a faithful life, looking to Jesus. He says you should mind your own business and work with your hands because work is good and it's valuable. Just as we told you, so that, get this, your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, so that you won't be dependent on anybody. Well, that's pretty incredible. Sometimes you get the idea that to really be a good Christian, you got to do radical, crazy, unbelievable things, and the Spirit's got to be working in you, and you see supernatural things, and God's healing people and doing these incredible things. Awesome when that happens. God can do whatever he wants to do. But the picture that Paul gives us here, he just boils it down and he simplifies it. And he gives us what we might call faithful presence. Be a faithful presence in your culture, in your place of work, and in your school, and in your neighborhood. Walk with Jesus. See his grace and truth, live in that grace and truth, and be present, and do good work, and seek to love your family, love your church. Don't get sidetracked with unimportant things. Be gracious to others, help meet needs, and share the truth of Jesus. Good deeds. And in that way, your light shines, and Jesus can use you to draw people to himself. So embracing community with truth and grace will also mean living good lives and doing good deeds. Doing good deeds, doing good. A lot of the doing good has to do with us just doing the roles and the assignments that God has given to us in this life on a daily basis in a regular way, walking with him and loving the people that God has put before us. But then I think there are also some specific good deeds that we can do as followers of Jesus, seeking to engage our culture. And the way that we could think about this is good deeds on a personal level and a church level. On a personal level and a church level. On a personal level, good deeds might be as simple as kindness to your neighbors, spending some time with a few people, eating a meal with someone, being thoughtful, asking people questions. When you see something going on in their life, saying, hey, can we talk about that? Or how are you doing? As needs arise, you can step into that. Asking people how they're doing at the gym, at school, at work. Or maybe God might prompt you to do something more specific and invite somebody to a church activity or event or to services if you think maybe they're ready for that, or into a Bible study or into a small group, or to just take a little bit more time with them. Or maybe you invite them into your circle of Christian friends. You're just personally saying, all right, Jesus, what good deeds do you have for me to do? Who have you placed around me? And then on the church level, for us at NorthPoint Church, grace, good deeds, looks like us investing in our community. It looks like trying to develop and continue to grow in a good relationship with our schools. Maybe you know this, but maybe you don't. There are 4 schools that are within a 1-mile radius around our church. And one of our goals for the last number of years has been to develop a good relationship with our school system. Now, maybe I shouldn't even say this, but a large part of our response to what happened during our 18 months of COVID was in directly influenced and directed by what are our schools doing. Because we have influence with them, because we have a relationship with them, because they respect NorthPoint Church. So how do we partner with them to do the best that we can in our community so that even though sometimes we get criticized, we can win the respect of outsiders? That's what we're trying to do. This last Friday, not this Friday, but a Friday before that, we had over 350 students here after the home football game at Johnston High School at overtime. Now, if you ever come to overtime, you know what overtime is. It is not an overly spiritual event. You know, it's kind of an understatement. It's not like we're taking a 45-minute revival message with an altar call and sharing, clearly articulating the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're not. Because if you've ever seen that, and you can imagine the 350 rowdy kids after a home football game, it's not the ideal environment for that. But it is a safe place for them to come, where their parents in the school says, thank you for providing a place that doesn't have alcohol and drugs for our kids to have a safe environment after the football games. And we build respect and we build influence. And maybe some of those kids are like, yeah, we should try the youth group at NorthPoint. And there's some other friends, you go there, right? Like, what's that all about? Why do you do that? That's good deeds. That's what we're seeking to do. It also looks like making our facility more and more available to our community to build goodwill. That's why we do blood drives here, and we do an after-school tutoring program that we're getting ready to start, and a number of community events, and more in this last year, community events taking place in our parking lot and on our grass and in the rooms that we have inside of the church. Good deeds looks like us investing specifically at NorthPoint. We feel God's call to us is to invest in foster care and adoption. And so we have a foster care fund. We help a number of families with their adoptions, and we have a family that has been working for years to adopt 2 boys from Africa. Years working, and COVID did not help either. And this Friday, Nate Frangie will be flying, Lord willing, to go finally after years pick up his boys. You can pray for them, pray it goes well. I think you got a COVID test, Nate, right? That you got to get through, pray the COVID away so that you can go and do this. And we've been with you guys and supporting you and loving you. And this is just a part of our call as the church, coming alongside of you guys and excited for what God is doing there. It looks like at NorthPoint welcoming refugees. We have a relationship with a government organization. It's called USCRI that, and Catholic Charities as well, operates and really does the work with refugees in Des Moines. USCRI is getting 5 families all of a sudden this week, they just found out. NorthPoint, we're gonna be moving in our 3rd refugee family this week. A number of you are involved with that. And we're also told from USCRI that they may be getting up to 40 Afghan families in the next year. And so we step up, we love people, we welcome them, we do the best that we can with that. It also looks like caring for needs, financial needs, through our community care fund. Look, we do all of these good deeds and more because Jesus loves us and he wants others to come into his love. This is earning the respect of outsiders. This is not just being about ourselves and being inward and being self-protective. It is getting out, loving, caring, serving, spending, giving in any way that we can to build goodwill, to genuinely care, and to have an opportunity to share Jesus with them, to share the truth of Jesus. Now, all of those things that I just mentioned to you, you can't do all of them. I often say this to you, I don't want you to do all of them. There is no possible way that if you're here at NorthPoint, don't hear me saying, hey, you need to adopt a child, you need to move in a refugee family, you need to tutor kids after school, you need to invite your neighborhood over, have a Bible study, and make a meal for every single person. I'm not saying that. Not all of you are called to do every single one of those things. But it does mean that somehow you engage culture with the truth and the grace of Jesus. It means that someone should be on your radar, right? It means you can do some good deed to love others. And together we'll continue to see God's work as we look to him, as we embrace community, and we engage our culture. Now, today at the beginning of this, I told you that I'm thankful for you, and I mean that. I really do mean that. Doing your job well, loving your neighbors, working on your marriage, being kind to others, and praying for an opportunity to share Jesus with someone, that's all part of being on mission with him. You're doing it. Many of you are. Keep going or step into it. Let's live in Jesus' grace and truth, and we will live it out. And I'm excited to see what Jesus will do through us. Would you pray with me?